The silence around Prince Harry's Invictus empire is getting louder by the day, because behind the smiling veteran photo ops, behind the emotional speeches, behind the carefully polished hero prince image, a financial storm is starting to explode. And now insiders, investigators, governments, and even corporate sponsors are quietly stepping back as if they already know something the public doesn't. What if the biggest royal scandal of the year isn't about family drama at all? What if it's about money? Millions and millions of dollars flowing through a charity built on wounded veterans, while the actual veterans themselves saw support slashed. And the moment people started asking direct questions, websites disappeared, documents were hidden, pages turned black with redactions, and suddenly everyone involved became very difficult to reach. That's the part nobody can ignore anymore, because charities that are comfortable with their books do not panic when people read them. But according to growing critics, that's exactly what happened after a commercial airline pilot named Maxwell started digging through Invictus financial records like a forensic accountant pulling apart a crime scene. And this is where the story takes a sharp turn from uncomfortable to explosive. Maxwell was not some tabloid gossip hunter looking for royal headlines. She was a trained professional with a finance background who simply started asking the question mainstream journalists strangely refused to ask: where exactly is all the money going? She downloaded public filings. She compared charity documents across multiple countries. She cross-checked Canadian government contracts with British Charity Commission reports. And according to reports, the deeper she looked, the uglier the math became. Then came the document that changed everything: a contract from British Columbia tied to the 2025 Vancouver Whistler Invictus Games. 15 million Canadian taxpayer dollars connected to Harry's project. But the most important section, the actual breakdown of where the money was supposed to go, had been completely blacked out. Entire pages, entire financial lines erased behind redacted ink. And after Maxwell reportedly shared the document publicly and encouraged pressure for transparency, the Invictus Canada website suddenly disappeared within hours. Gone. Then it returned with restrictions forcing users through Dropbox logins so the organization could track who was viewing files. Think about how bizarre that looks. If everything is clean, why hide the paperwork? Why monitor readers? Why restructure access after questions start spreading online? And suddenly, Maxwell wasn't alone anymore. Investigative author Tom Bauer entered the conversation with claims that hit like a grenade inside royal circles. According to Bauer's published allegations, Invictus money may have funded luxury travel, private jets, and expensive hotel arrangements connected to Harry and Meghan. These weren't random internet rumors whispered anonymously on social media. These claims appeared in a legally reviewed published book sold internationally. And critics noticed something very important. Despite how serious the allegations were, no successful legal action publicly crushed them. That silence became suspicious all by itself. But the real shock came when people started calculating the numbers. The Vancouver Whistler Invictus Games reportedly carried a staggering cost of over 63 million Canadian dollars for just 543 competitors. That works out to more than $118,000 per veteran. And that figure instantly triggered outrage because critics began asking a devastating question. Could that money have directly transformed veterans' lives instead of funding massive event structures and luxury operations? Could prosthetics, homes, wheelchairs, mental health care, or rehabilitation programs have benefited more than branding campaigns and giant ceremonies? Suddenly, the emotional good cause shield protecting Invictus started cracking under pure mathematics. Even worse, comparisons started making the organization look bloated beyond explanation. The American Warrior Games, the very competition that inspired Harry to create Invictus in the first place, reportedly operates at a fraction of the cost. Germany's similar adaptive sporting event costs dramatically less too. Yet somehow, Invictus spending kept ballooning bigger and bigger every year like a machine growing hungry on its own expansion. And critics noticed another painful contradiction hiding inside the charity's own filings. During the same period, Invictus income reportedly rose by more than 40%. Direct grants to veteran organizations were allegedly cut by 63%. Read that again carefully, because that statistic alone has become radioactive. More money coming in while less money reached veterans. And that's when the dominoes started falling one after another in a way that made this entire situation feel less like random criticism and more like a system beginning to crack under pressure. Because suddenly, major names connected to Invictus Invictus were quietly stepping away at the exact moment public scrutiny was intensifying. Boeing, one of the biggest and most powerful corporate sponsors attached to the Games, reportedly walked away from the partnership without fanfare. No dramatic press conference, no emotional explanation, just a silent exit. And in corporate language, silence can sometimes scream louder than words. Massive companies do not casually detach themselves from globally photographed charities unless internal calculations start telling them the risk outweighs the benefit. Then came another uncomfortable moment. Melanie Poole, one of the most respected governance professionals tied to the Birmingham 2027 Invictus project, quietly resigned from the board. And this wasn't some celebrity figurehead looking for publicity. This was someone deeply experienced in British charity oversight, someone whose entire professional reputation was built on governance and accountability. Her departure immediately triggered speculation because it happened right as financial questions around Invictus were growing louder online. Critics started whispering the same question everywhere. Are insiders quietly running for the exits before official investigations begin? And then Australia delivered what may have been the biggest warning signal of all. The Australian government reportedly refused to renew around $9 million in funding tied to Invictus Australia, despite simultaneously increasing defense spending by billions. That contrast shocked observers because the government clearly had money available for veterans and defense priorities, yet somehow Invictus no longer made the cut. Even local Invictus leadership reportedly claimed they were blindsided by the decision with barely any notice before the announcement became public. That kind of move sends a message without needing a press release. Governments rarely explain what they're thinking in public, but budgets often reveal what officials no longer feel comfortable defending behind closed doors. And hanging over all of this is a darker shadow from Harry's past charity controversies. Because critics immediately started connecting the situation to the public collapse surrounding Centreball, the charity Harry co-founded years earlier in honor of Princess Diana. That organization exploded into chaos with resignations, accusations, governance disputes, and public conflict severe enough to trigger outside scrutiny. So now observers are asking whether Invictus is becoming the second major charity connected to Harry facing the exact same pattern: confusion, departures, financial questions, and growing public distrust. Once is a crisis, twice starts looking like a pattern. But perhaps the most disturbing part of this entire scandal is the financial structure itself, because according to investigators examining the records, public taxpayer money from Canada reportedly flowed into local organizing corporations before licensing fees were transferred across the Atlantic to the Invictus Games Foundation in the United Kingdom. And critics say that once the money entered that structure, tracking exactly where it ultimately went became dramatically harder for ordinary citizens trying to follow the trail. The actual licensing figures connected to those transfers were reportedly redacted from public documents. Blacked out, hidden. Again and again, the same wall appeared whenever people tried to trace the exact movement of money. And that is the detail making this story impossible to ignore now. Because nobody is saying wounded veterans do not deserve support. Nobody is saying adaptive sports are not meaningful. The real question exploding online is far more dangerous than that. People are asking whether the emotional power of veteran suffering became the perfect shield protecting a rapidly expanding financial machine nobody wanted audited too closely. They are asking whether Invictus slowly transformed from a mission into a brand, and brands protect themselves very differently than charities do. So now the pressure is building from every direction at once. Sponsors leaving, trustees resigning, governments pulling funding, journalists digging deeper, investigators comparing numbers across countries, authors publishing allegations, critics demanding unredacted records. And through all of it, Prince Harry's silence is becoming louder with every passing week, because the public relations image that once protected Invictus is starting to collide headfirst with hard numbers, missing transparency, and questions nobody inside the organization seems eager to answer directly. And if those answers do eventually come out in full detail, many people believe this entire scandal could become the moment the carefully constructed mythology around Harry's hero prince image finally begins collapsing in public view.